Well, another Park to Prem is in the books. Wanderers FC, you have been beautiful. But now we have one of my favourite bits about these save games. Going into the future, seeing what happens to this squad upon my departure. And of course, with this Wanderers squad that we've assembled, one crucial thing is the fact every player that plays for this team has to be at least partially English. I am kind of terrified for how the AI is going to manage this. Anyway, it's time for me to hit the funny button that memes are about. I'm resigning as manager. Wanderers, you've been beautiful. Stuart's begging me to stay. I'm keen to leave, Stuart. My time's done. Gibraltar is calling. You should be watching the streams if you've not been. And with that, our time at Wanderers is... Wait, did I just... I misclicked, didn't I, there? Okay, now I've resigned. Stuart nearly won me over. The board increased my transfer budget by 35 million to try and make me stay. I hope the next manager gets that. Anyway, there's been a mass exodus of other people leaving the club. Neil Critchley, our long-term assistant manager, has left too. And with that, our time at Wanderers is done. We're going to run the intro. I'm going to come back a year later. Are they going to have done the three-peat of 3 Premier League titles in a row? Well, I hope so. The new manager's got a standard that I've set to match. Of course, welcome back to Park to Prem. I hope you guys are doing amazing, and I hope you're looking forward to this video. Here is our manager profile, a year on from leaving Wanderers. Of course, we won the FA Cup, we won the Premier League. How did Wanderers do the very next year? They've finished 8th, and they're looking for a new manager. That is not good. If I want to find a positive, Dion Lincoln, who was someone I signed in the very last transfer window before we left the club, he is now listed as the club's hot prospect. The not so good news, they're not giving him any game time, probably impacting his development. Anyway, as for the more pressing matters, Marco Rose was given the job and sacked after a year. Yeah, it's not gone to plan for him. So looking at the Premier League table here, Andy White was top goal scorer. He finished ahead of Nicky Meredith due to fewer games played. Yeah, things you love to see there. But sadly, Wanderers missing out completely on European football after bottling it against Brighton on the last day of the season. Now, in terms of transfers they bought a new goalkeeper. You know what? Maybe I left a note when I left the club. They brought in Luis Enrique from Man City. He's got a 6.57 rating in 17 games played. He joined them halfway through the year. There's a lot of big, bright red, isn't there, in these games played? I hope Caleb's still at the club. Speaking of which, you can see the departures here. Nothing too crazy in terms of sales from what I can see. There's nothing too triggering yet. Branthwaite sold, but to be fair, he was getting on a little bit. In terms of competitions outside the Premier League, they bottled it on penalties in the EFL Cup quarter-finals against Chelsea. They couldn't win the FA Cup for a 4th year in a row. They lost 4-2 to Arsenal despite Andy White scoring in the 2nd minute. And as for the Champions League, they lost to Newcastle in the round of 16. Some things never change. Now, in terms of the shape that they've been playing this season just gone, they've been playing a 4-2-2 like this. I mean, Akena and White up top is interesting. Akena has been their kind of secondary striker. He's got 20 goals in the season, making him the 2nd top goal scorer. He's also broken into the English national team. That's pretty big for him. As for the rest of the squad, Chris Barrett, 3 starts in the season, 14 sub-appearances. That is just criminal mismanagement of this guy. They've got him transfer listed for 75 million. Jonathan Banks had a solid season, 11 goals, 5 assists in the Premier League. Not quite on par with the season that we got out of him. And in terms of players playing not so well, Joe McHugh, 29 starts, has struggled a lot. He's now loan listed. Nothing makes sense. If I want to find a positive, Ajaria's got 41 starts, so Ajaria is still playing in the national team, and he's got caps for England, finally. In fact, looking at the England national team here, you can see there's a handful of Wanderers players, and by a handful, I mean 7 people. Is that how many players you can fit in your hand? No idea. A bit of a mix and match of players here. Where's Wallace? Gavin Wallace has not played much at all this year. He was really, really good for us in our final few seasons. Admittedly, our most recent year, he did slow off a little bit, but this just makes me sad. You know the whole meme, look how they massacred my boy. Yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. They've got a new manager who's going to come in and hopefully fix things. I'm concerned about relegation right now. We're going forward 25 years today. I'm going to join you in 4 more seasons for 5 years on from me. We'll see what remains of my Wanderers legacy. I should mention, by the way, that the Wanderers save games are now available for everyone to download. Of course, if you're a subscriber on Twitch or you're a YouTube channel member of the First Team Regular or higher, you've had access for them for the last week. Everyone else, go download them now if you want to keep playing on either from the end of the save game, or I've also published a save game when we first got promoted to the Premier League. That was a really challenging season, maybe a good jumping on point. I'm in the year 2039. You'd be forgiven for thinking I've not gone forward, because there is no manager at Wanderers again, and they've not won the title in the last 5 years. Yikes. In terms of managers, Vincent Kompany managed the club for 1 year and 9 days and then left after 1 season. And he left to go and be PSG manager, and now he's at Arsenal. He is just getting out and around. In that season, he was in charge. He did actually manage to get Wanderers 4th place, though. So you know what? Fair play, Vinny. That's better than I was expecting based on the first year without me. As for things since then, well, Matthias Jasel joined the club. He is now... well, he's just been fired. Prior to that, he had been West Ham manager. And he was fired following an 8th placed finish. Now, in terms of the finishes he got after Vinny Kompany finished 4th, he finished 5th in his first year, still got Champions League football. In 2038, a 3rd place finish. But yeah, for this year just gone, the wheels very much came off. Now, I will say, very pleased to report, Tammy Ajaria is still at the club as captain and now has 23 caps for England. Is still playing on the regular too. Andy White is still listed as vice-captain and he still looks bloody tremendous, although the goal scoring has slowed down. And Jonathan Banks is still the key player. Still feels like the DNA of my former Wanderers team is very much here. Now, in Vincent Kompany's season in charge, they won a European competition. Wanderers won the Conference League. Gavin Wallace, I'm pleased to report, got man of the match in that game. And he is still very much at the club, albeit he's still not playing very much. Some good news as well, the following season, they managed to win the EFL Cup final. The one competition that eluded me, they managed to win. Bernard Brennan scored in the final, which is cool to see. He's still at Wanderers. And Sam Blissett also scored in this game. I don't know who Sam Blissett is. He's a versatile midfielder that they signed for £19 million. And they've been using a lot, which shocks me because he looks very underwhelming. Sadly, besides that, no silverware to speak of. The historic FA Cup Wanderers Association, I don't want to say it's fizzling out. They've not made it to the final in the last 5 years. Now, looking at how they lined up for the season just gone, loads of familiar faces here, which is really, really cool to see. Miller is back in the team. Remember Matthew Miller? I described him as my biggest transfer mistake when I signed him for 17 million. Wanderers picked him up for 36 million. That is questionable, isn't it? I mean, there's no way he's been starting ahead of Ajaria, is there? Although, looking at things, it looks like they've been playing Ajaria at centre-back, which raises more questions than answers, if anything. He's not the best in the air. I mean, looking at the rest of the team here, White, Banks, Akena, Niall Townsend is still at the club. He's made a career for himself as a Wanderers kind of youth academy prospect who stuck around after my departure. Granted, he's not been all that impressive. Luis Enrique is still their goalkeeper as well. I mean, good news, he improved after that shocking first season. A little bit. He's still not better than Caleb. Speaking of which, Caleb is just still here but watching from the sidelines. Yeah, he's not played much football in the last 4 years, but he is still here. And I know someone's going to ask Jack, who's the regen centre-back? Stuart. Okay, well, I hope they've got some better centre-backs than Ajaria and this guy. Now, I don't want to criticise the Football Manager transfer AI, but I'm absolutely going to do it. The first team currently has 2 centre-backs. What is this just the case of the AI not knowing how to sign the English players? That is shocking. I will say as well, I'm a little bit concerned. I look through this first team and there's loads of players I recognise, including Dion Lincoln, who's gone on to develop at the club. But if I just highlight players here from Brennan upwards, 15 players in the first team are 29 or older. And they've not won anything with these players. They're all getting older. The future could be precarious. I half expected them to do some sales that were really going to annoy me. And to be fair, the AI has done that. Chris Barrett's gone to Juventus for £57 million. I mean, to be fair, that's not a bad return. Marcus Sheldon went to Porto for 20 million. To be fair, he was really slowing down as a player under me. Not an awful amount of money received. Hasn't played much for England since his early debut. And Joe McHugh was the other big departure under Vincent Kompany. In terms of other transfer highlights over the last few years, Shea Salmon is now the second choice goalkeeper at Man City. And you might remember Jeremy Lechevier, the goalkeeper that we sold and then brought back. He's actually gone on to play for England. I might have just found the sale that's upset me the most. Sean Steele went to Bayern Munich for £17 million. He's gone on to get 19 goals in 24 games for them for the season just gone. That is shocking transfer business. Besides that, actually, there's not too many sales going on. I figured they'd go on a big fire sale of all my players, but actually, I guess because they're just good English players, they've kept hold of most of them. On the one hand, that implies that we had a lot of the best English players. On the other, they've not signed a new generation, like I've already said. And without a manager, having finished 8th, and with me now about to jump another 5 years in the future to see what they're looking like 10 years on from my departure, I'm worried. Ajaria, Andy Whitebanks, all 31. Will any of them still be alive and kicking at Wanderers? Let's hop in our time machine. Now, it does go without saying with these kind of videos, I'm never going to be able to go into infinite details, but if you want to check out the save games in the future, alongside the save games already mentioned, they are all going to be linked down below for you to check out, so you can look at things in full detail. I am now 50 years old, and the year is 2044. I've been unemployed for 10 years, and Wanderers... I mean, the good news is, they're still in the Premier League. So that's good. In fact, they've not been relegated. They finished 14th last year. They've just finished 11th. I did fear that they might get relegated. So the fact that they're still in the Premier League feels promising. Hopefully now they might be able to stabilise a little bit. They did have a little bit of a scare last year. It was their closest kind of to the drop position, although they were still 13 points safe. Of course, the club is still playing at New Forest Place. In terms of the bank balance, it doesn't look overly great, if I'm being honest. I do wonder if the bank balance being in the negative is just due to the fact that they're selling out the stadium constantly. Yeah, they are selling out the stadium constantly and can't expand it anymore. And because of how Football Manager works, I don't know if they'll build a stadium for at least 20 years. Which is a problem. In terms of managers, oh my word. Okay, well, they've got through a few people. Ollie Werner came in for half a year. Then Mokwena came in for 280 days. And now they brought in Sam Nicholson. They've had a few interim managers in the time as well. I mean, this just looks like a mess, doesn't it? Stephen Mellor was probably their most successful manager. He left them to go to Chelsea. I'm looking at competition landmarks here. There was a Champions League runners-up situation. Yeah, I'll be honest, I did miss this earlier. They lost to PSG 1-0. 1-0 they lost. Oh, look at it. Look at the sadness. Lloyd Weston was the best performer. They didn't have a shot on target. There were 2 shots in the entire final. I mean, it's one of the worst Champions League finals ever. I mean, besides that, in terms of successes, they've won the Conference League and the Europa League and, well, runner-up in the Super Cup. But only 2 teams playing that. They also won the European South American Challenge. So suck it, South America. But yeah, no more FA Cup wins since my departure. And just, well, look, they've won the Conference League twice in the Europa League. It's not quite what we dreamed of, is it? Now, in terms of how they've been lining up, they are playing a 4-4-2, and Colby Hatswell is still in the team. Age 32, he's going to Al Hilal. Okay, well, that's really ruined that lovely narrative. 15 years he spent at the club captain, gone to Saudi Arabia, I think on a free transfer. Yeah, that's painful. I will say, Akena's still at the club, and he looks like an absolutely phenomenal player. We signed him for 35 million. People in the comments said I overpaid, but look at this. Double figures for so many seasons in a row. At 32, he is still an absolute baller. I did also spot Muscat here. Now, Muscat was the key player at the club when I left 10 years ago. He was in the academy, he was a youngster. You can see he's been loaned out and slowly developed. Played in 35 games of the year, just gone. 9 goals. In fact, I'm looking at things here. They sold him for 37 million and then signed him back for 31. Great deal. I mean, in terms of strikers, he's not awful. For a player who came through their academy, you know what? He's no Andy White, is he? Speaking of which, if I look at the overall best 11 and hit the where are they now, we can see where certain players are up to. 5 members of the team are retired. Ajaria, Hatswell, James Phillips and Akena and Dion Lincoln are still with the club. Ajaria is still with the club. They've taken the armband off him, but he's still here. He doesn't really have physicals anymore. What I will say is he's been at one club now for 20 years. Respect. Granted, he is on his last legs. He stopped playing well. James Phillips is in the overall best 11. He is a player who was signed after my departure, and whilst his numbers aren't all that impressive, he's gone on to be a legend. Dion Lincoln is still with the club as well. He's not played for England yet, but he is a good little attacking midfielder. I always brought him in to be the bank's backup. Despite a few major injuries, he looks like quite a good player. Luis Enrique, the goalkeeper, has gone on to play for Barcelona alongside Jonathan Banks, who is about to retire at the end of the year. The 36-year-old moved for £77 million. I mean, they got £77 million, Wanderers, for a 32-year-old. It's not bad. He is one hell of a player, mind you. Gavin Wallace is playing for Porto, although much like all of this golden generation of players, he has seen better days. Lloyd Weston is playing for Chelsea. He's about to retire. He left for £13 million. Bernard Brennan is about to join Real Madrid, aged 34. You'll love to see it. He moved for £95 million. Wait. Oh, he's joining Villa from Real Madrid. That makes a bit more sense. He got sold, by the way, for £95 million. I nearly sold him for £100 million, didn't I, when I was in charge? Elsewhere, Caleb Anson is a goalkeeping coach who doesn't have a job. Hasn't had a job in a long time. Carl Flood retired aged 34. He went to Al Hilal. Of course he did. Andy White retired aged 35. He went to Al Ittihad for a bit. All of the Wanderers players just went to Saudi Arabia to cash in at the end of their careers. 66 caps for England for Andy White. Marcus Sheldon retired after a brief stint at Braga. And Niall Townsend spent his entire career at Wanderers. 324 games. Of course, a couple of loan spells in there. What a legend. And in fact, if we come to this screen here, we can see legends of the club. Tammy Ajaria considered a legend. Andy White under the icons. Hatswell, Flood, Banks, Wallace and Anson under favoured personnel. That makes me feel happy. Sadly, though, no further Premier League or FA Cup success upon my departure and no Champions League win. They did lose in one final, mind you. I do feel like now 10 years in the future, it's kind of the end of that era where I know the players and the club and have this connection with it. But I am interested now to go 15 years forward. Just take a brief look at things. Are they still playing at New Forest Place? Are they still in the Premier League? Are they still one of the big clubs in England? Right now, they are listed, I was going to say highly. Their reputation has been dropping off a little bit. But you know what? They are still one of the big boys in England, Wanderers. Will they still be there 25 years on from my departure? Let's go forward 15 years. I hope I'm not going to be looking at a really sad sight in a moment. Okay, let's click on Wanderers and take a peek. They're still in the Premier League. They are still in the Premier League. They've got great youth facility and youth recruitment still. Their key player is a bloke called Michael Boateng, who is asking to leave the club. We're going to look beyond that. They signed him for £60 million. You know what? Shades of Carl Flood. Looking at this guy, a bargain signing from Aston Villa. Although, admittedly, when you look at the league history graph here, it has been a tumultuous time. They finished as high as 5th, actually, only 5 years ago. But they have had finishes down in 15th, and that 14th finish that we looked at before. Not Champions League football being played then. Looking at their first team, I mean, they have a first team. It's a very small team here. 20 players. Interesting. Their top goal scorers for the season, Rafferty Morgan, he looks all right, and Ricky Anson, who's about to retire. How have they finished as high as they have with these players? In terms of where the club ranks in terms of reputation, they've not actually dropped off in the last 15 years, which is a bit of a pleasant surprise. Sadly, though, they are still stuck at New Forest Place. They don't have a new stadium yet. Are they maybe building one? Oh, they're due to move in to the 58,000 capacity Work the Space Park in 3 years. That's you know what? That's the most wholesome note to end on, isn't it? They've named the stadium after me. They're not moving in for 3 years, mind you. Oh, I just feel warm and fuzzy inside. I mean, looking at the club here, you can see we are listed as one of the legends alongside Tammy Ajaria, who's now, well, he was Eastbourne Borough manager for a little bit. He's currently looking for his next job in management. I'll tell you what, actually, as an assistant manager, he's absolutely nuts. He's actually insane, is Tammy Ajaria as a manager. Wow. That's really weird and rare. Sadly, myself, Ajaria, and Andy White are the only players that I'm familiar with here that remain in the kind of favoured personnel section. Other players have been lost to the sands of time. And in terms of overall competition success, they've not won an FA Cup in the last 25 years. They've not won the Premier League in the last 25 years. No closer to winning a Champions League, although they did win the Europa League 8 years ago. and they won the Conference League 2 years before that. And despite everything, if I look at the overall best 11 here, there's still plenty of familiar faces. Brennan's in there, Andy White's in there, Hatswell, Lincoln, who we signed, is still in there as well, which is cool. Ajaria is in at centre-back. That upsets me. And somehow Luis Enrique, the goalkeeper, who had the worst half a season ever, has managed to sneak in ahead of Anson. I want an investigation. That's disgraceful. Cool to see here as well, Andy White still holds the record for most league goals by a player at 267. Tammy Ajaria holds the record for most league appearances at 659. I have a sneaking suspicion those are going to be difficult records for someone to beat. And you know what? Ending things of this video, I'm just pleasantly surprised that the team didn't go to complete mush. Obviously, we noticed that they only had 2 centre-backs at one point. I'm sure there's other weird stuff that went on with the squad building. But in general, I really expected things to end much worse than they have. And the fact they're moving into a stadium named after me makes me just feel nice. So what a nice note to end on. So like I already mentioned, the save games for Wanderers, both when I was managing and some of these in the future files, are going to be available, linked down below. Make sure to download them and you can just load them up in your own Football Manager if you want to check them out. And yeah, I just want to say a big thank you for watching this video, especially if you've got until the end. You are probably as invested in this save as I have been. Hopefully you have, as I mentioned earlier, been able to catch the live streams we've been doing over on the channel. If you haven't, if you go to the YouTube channel under the live tab, there's a load of streams there. If you want to just binge watch them at 1.5 times speed and try and catch up, I wish you good luck. We are having a blast in Gibraltar. It'd be wicked to have you join us. Now, in terms of what's next for the channel here, I am cooking up a few different save game ideas. I'm unsure with which I want to do just yet, but the plan between now and FM26 is to kind of avoid doing a super long-term 3 or 4 month long save game. Do a few shorter adventures, maybe countries, leagues that I haven't managed in before. I haven't managed in a long time. I hope that sounds interesting. Anyway, folks, I want to thank you so much for watching this series. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you guys again soon. It is me, Jack. Have a lovely weekend. I'll talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.